morning muster aboard the CPV. Aurora carried the same ritual formality it did every cycle. The flagship of the Lyran Armada hung in space like a gleaming sapphire against the backdrop of the Cerulean Nebula, its massive hull reflecting the iridescent blues and purples that swirled through the cosmic dust clouds. Around it, a flock of sleek alien vessels maintained perfect formation, their energy signatures pulsing in synchronized harmony. Commander Celine Torres stood on the observation deck, hands clasped behind her back, watching the nebula's cosmic dance. Human by blood but raised among the Lyrans after her parents' diplomatic mission became permanent. She had risen through the ranks faster than any hybrid officer before her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation knot, and her uniform bore the silver insignia of the Lyran Command. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said to no one in particular. Lieutenant Kareem Val, her reptilian first officer, moved to her side. His scaled skin caught the light from the nebula, casting prismatic reflections across the polished deck. "Beauty is irrelevant to our mission, Commander," he replied, voice carrying the characteristic rasp of his species. "The council delegates are growing impatient." Celine sighed. Kareem never failed to maintain his professional distance, especially around her. His distrust of humans was barely concealed, though she had earned a grudging respect over their 3 years serving together. "Then we shouldn't keep them waiting," she replied, turning toward the bridge. She was halfway there when the ship's alarm blared. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors. "Unidentified vessel dropping out of FTL," the tactical officer's voice boomed through the comms. 50 kilometers off our bow." Celine broke into a run, Kareem right behind her. They burst onto the bridge just as the main view screen filled with the image of a sleek, obsidian vessel materializing from the fabric of space itself. Its hull bore no markings, no identification, but its design was unmistakably human. "Impossible," Kareem hissed. "No human ship could penetrate our security perimeter." Before anyone could respond, the dark vessel unleashed a cascade of energy that no one on the bridge had ever witnessed. 3 Lyran cruisers simply ceased to exist in under 30 seconds. Their matter scattered into the nebula like cosmic dust. The council delegates, gathered for what was supposed to be a routine inspection, recoiled in horror. "What in the 7 hells was that?" demanded Councillor Thrain, his crystalline appendages quivering in alarm. Celine stared at the view screen, a cold knot forming in her stomach. "That's a human warship," she said quietly. "And it just declared war." The comm station erupted with a burst of activity as distress signals flooded in from across the fleet. Raina Cho, the Aurora's communications specialist, filtered through them with practiced efficiency, though her usually joking demeanor had vanished. "We've lost contact with the Valiant, Dauntless, and Peregrine," she reported, fingers flying across her console. "No survivors detected." In the background, Dr. Oren Halve observed the bridge crew silently, his 8 eyes taking in each micro-expression, each tremor of fear. The ship's psychologist had warned about this moment, the breaking point where stress would crystallize into panic or resolve. The mysterious vessel hung in space, motionless now, as if waiting. "Open a channel," Celine ordered, stepping forward. "Are you mad?" Kareem interjected. "That ship just destroyed 3 cruisers. And it could destroy us too if it wanted to," Celine replied. "But it's waiting." "Why?" Before Raina could establish communications, the warship vanished, jumping back into FTL as suddenly as it had arrived, leaving only debris and questions in its wake. 3 hours later, the Empire Council's emergency session broadcast across all secure channels. Celine and her senior officers gathered in the briefing room, watching the holographic projection of Grand Counselor Vex address the Alliance. "This unprovoked attack will not stand," Vex declared, his gelatinous form pulsating with indignation. Intelligence reports suggest this vessel may be part of humanity's rumored revenge weapon program. Their rapid expansion through the outer rim has been concerning, but this aggression is unprecedented. The projection shifted to show various angles of the attack, slowed down to reveal the devastating precision of the human vessel's weaponry. The Council hereby authorizes Operation Iron Dominion. Vex continued. All available fleets are to locate and neutralize this threat before humanity can deploy more of these vessels. The transmission ended and the room fell silent. Quite the predicament, Dr. Halv noted, breaking the tension. The humans appear to have developed weapons beyond our understanding. But why attack now? Reyna asked, tugging nervously at her short-cropped hair. Humans have been part of the Alliance for decades. Sure, they're weird, but they've never been hostile. Karim snorted. You speak from ignorance. Humans have always been unpredictable, their loyalties flexible. It was only a matter of time. Celine remained silent, lost in thought. Something about the attack pattern seemed familiar, almost like a signature. She accessed her personal console, scrolling through old mission reports until she found what she was looking for. Tactics similar to those developed by her former fiancé, Captain Marcus Kane. He had disappeared on a deep space mission 3 years ago. His ship declared lost with all hands. Her private comm chimed with an encrypted message from Fleet Command. As she read it, her blood ran cold. She had been specifically requested to lead a strike team to hunt down the warship. The message contained a classified addendum. Facial recognition had identified a figure on the enemy bridge. The image was grainy, but the resemblance to Kane was unmistakable. They knew about her connection and were using it. Celine closed the message and looked up at her waiting officers. We have new orders, she said, keeping her voice steady. The Aurora will lead a task force to locate and neutralize the human warship. Karim looked surprised. Us? Surely a dedicated combat unit would be more appropriate. Apparently, High Command thinks our unique perspective might be valuable, Celine replied, avoiding his gaze. We depart in 6 hours. As the officers filed out, Dr. Halv lingered behind. Commander, he said softly, I couldn't help but notice your reaction to those orders. There's something personal about this mission for you, isn't there? Celine considered denying it, but the doctor's penetrating gaze made lying pointless. Maybe, she admitted, but it won't affect my judgment. Halv's expression remained neutral. Of course not. Just remember that revenge is a poison that affects the vessel that carries it long before it reaches its target. Celine watched him leave, his words echoing in her mind. If Kane truly was alive, if he had somehow turned against everything they had both believed in, she needed to know why. And she needed to stop him before he ignited a war that would consume the galaxy. The assembly of the task force proceeded with remarkable speed. By the following cycle, a fleet of 20 ships had gathered at the rendezvous point, a mix of Lyran cruisers, Tholian interceptors, and Draconian dreadnoughts. The Aurora would serve as the command vessel, coordinating their hunt through the Outer Rim territories where the human warship had last been detected. Commander Jax Mercer arrived with the Draconian contingent, his broad shoulders and confident stride drawing attention as he boarded the Aurora. Once Celine's rival at the Academy, now her partner in command for this mission. Their relationship had always been complicated by an undercurrent of attraction neither had acted upon. Commander Torres, he greeted her with a formal salute that didn't quite hide his smile. Been a while. Commander Mercer, she replied, returning the salute. I see they scraped the bottom of the barrel for this mission. He laughed, the sound rich and warm. Good to see you too. Shall we discuss strategy? Or would you prefer to reminisce about how I beat you in the Centauri simulation? You cheated, she said, fighting a smile of her own. I improvised, he corrected, falling into step beside her as they headed toward the briefing room. The assembled officers represented the best tactical minds in the Alliance. Celine laid out what little they knew about the enemy vessel, its unprecedented firepower, its stealth capabilities, its apparent human origin. Our first priority is tracking, she explained. Once we locate the target, we contain and disable, not destroy. The Council wants this technology intact. And if that's not possible? Jax asked, leaning forward. Celine met his gaze. Then we ensure it can never be used against us again. As the briefing ended and officers dispersed to their assignments, Reyna sidled up to Kareem in the corridor. 20 credits says you crack first, she said. The reptilian officer blinked his nictitating membrane in confusion. Explain. Under pressure, Reyna clarified. We're heading into what might be the biggest firefight of our careers. 20 credits says you lose your cool before I do. Kareem's scales rippled in what might have been amusement. Your human games are irrelevant. 40 credits then, Reyna pressed, grinning. After a pause, Kareem gave a curt nod. Accepted. Though I must inform you that my species evolved to hunt in volcanic wastelands, pressure is familiar territory. We'll see, Reyna sang as she walked away. We'll see. 3 days into their search, the task force received intelligence about unusual activity near Theta Prime, a mining colony on the edge of Alliance space. Celine ordered a small patrol to investigate, 2 light cruisers and a scout vessel, with the rest of the fleet maintaining distance to avoid detection. The patrol never returned. When the Aurora arrived at their last known coordinates, they found only debris and a fading energy signature. The scout vessel's black box, recovered from the wreckage, contained just 18 seconds of footage, another ambush, identical in precision to the first. A stealth human frigate, smaller than the warship they were hunting but clearly of the same design, had appeared without warning and opened fire. Before the patrol could respond, the attacker vanished back into FTL. The crew gathered in silent shock as Celine replayed the footage on the bridge. It's a whole fleet, Jax muttered, not just one ship. We don't know that, Celine countered, though doubt crept into her voice. 2 attacks. Same pattern, Kareem said. The humans have been planning this for years. Reyna looked up from her console. But why? What could we have possibly done to warrant this? Dr. Halve, who had been observing from the back of the bridge, spoke up. Fear manifests in strange ways. Some among the crew believe humans possess alien technology beyond our understanding. Others see them as reckless saviors. Cleansing corruption from the Alliance, both perspectives are dangerous oversimplifications. Or what matters, Celine interjected, was stopping them before more lives are lost. That night, as Celine reviewed tactical data in her quarters, her door chimed. Jax Mercer stood outside, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of what appeared to be genuine Terran whiskey. Thought you could use this, he said. And maybe some company that isn't giving you reports or saluting every 5 seconds. She hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. That obvious, huh? That you're carrying the weight of this mission alone? Yeah. He poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into each glass and handed one to her. To finding answers. They drank in silence for a moment. You know, Jax said finally. Scuttlebutt says you have a personal stake in this. Something about the warship's captain. Celine froze, glass halfway to her lips. Scuttlebutt needs to mind its own business. Hey, Jax set his drink down. We're flying blind into what could be a trap. If there's something I should know... There's not, she snapped, then sighed. Just... Old ghosts. Nothing that affects the mission. Jack studied her face. Ghosts have a way of becoming very solid when you least expect it. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the space between them seemed charged with unspoken things. Celine found herself noticing the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, the way his uniform fit across his shoulders. "We should focus on the mission," she said softly, though she didn't move away. "The mission, right." Jax's smile didn't quite reach his eyes as he stepped back. 0600 tomorrow. We're implementing the new sensor array. Might give us an edge. After he left, Celine stared at the closed door, feeling the weight of everything left unsaid. Her hand drifted to the holographic pendant she kept hidden beneath her uniform, a picture of her and Kane from happier days. If he really was behind these attacks, she needed to understand why. And if he wasn't, then who was she hunting? Across the galaxy, aboard the battle cruiser Imperator, Admiral Kale Zelerick stood before a viewport, watching distant stars. His black armor, ceremonial but functional, reflected nothing. A survivor of the initial ambush, he had lost his flagship and 3,000 crew in seconds. "The human vessel has been spotted in the Kyloth sector," his aide reported. "Shall we alert the Alliance fleet?" "No," Zelerick replied, voice like gravel. "This is personal now." He turned, revealing a face bisected by an old scar, eyes like chips of ice. "Dispatch our hunter-killers. I want that ship found, but not engaged. Not yet." "Sir?" "The humans have demonstrated their technological superiority," Zelerick explained. "But technology is not everything. Sometimes, victory requires sacrifice." In his private chambers later, Zelerick reviewed classified files about human warfare, their history of guerrilla tactics, psychological operations, asymmetric responses. He paused on footage from 20 years ago, the glassing of Zelar Prime, his home colony. Official records blamed a reactor accident, but Zelerick knew the truth: human black ops, testing weapons far beyond Alliance limitations. His family had been there. He'd been off-world, serving as a junior officer. He alone survived to remember. "This time," he whispered to the empty room, "this time, you pay the full price." The next day, disturbing reports reached the Aurora. Alliance outposts had intercepted transmissions suggesting human infiltration throughout the fleet. Crew tensions escalated as security protocols tightened. Celine ordered random screenings, though she doubted the rumors. "This is exactly what they want," she told her senior staff. "Division, suspicion. Or perhaps it's exactly what we need," Kareem countered. "Vigilance." Dr. Halve cleared his throat. Fear of infiltration is often more damaging than infiltration itself. It erodes trust, the foundation of any effective unit. Reyna, uncharacteristically quiet through the meeting, suddenly grinned. "I have an idea that might lift morale, if you'll authorize it." "Commander." Celine raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." The next morning, the crew filing into the main briefing room found themselves face-to-face with a life-sized hologram of Admiral Zelerick, dressed in a frilly pink tutu, performing an elaborate ballet. Another showed him in an ancient Earth costume called a chicken suit, clucking dramatically while reading his own fearsome speeches. Laughter erupted across the room. Even some of the draconian officers, normally stoic, struggled to maintain composure. Kareem, standing beside Reyna at the back of the room, actually chuckled, a sound Celine had never heard him make before. "You win the bet," he admitted grudgingly to Reyna. "I've cracked." Reyna beamed triumphantly. "Told you, human humor, universal remedy for tension." "Don't push it," Kareem replied, but his usual edge was missing. The mood shift was palpable throughout the ship. As psychological warfare, Reyna's prank had been surprisingly effective, not against the enemy, but against the fear that had been spreading among the crew. 3 days later, as the task force patrolled the outer edge of the Maw Nebula, a treacherous region of space known for magnetic anomalies that played havoc with sensors, the Aurora picked up a distress signal from a human passenger pod. Against Kareem's objections, Celine ordered a rescue operation. The pod contained a single occupant, Lieutenant Aaron Lee, a human biochemist who had been aboard a research vessel attacked by unknown forces. He was brought to medical, suffering from minor injuries and exposure. They came out of nowhere, he told Celine when she came to interview him. 1 minute we were cataloging nebula samples, the next, he shuddered. Everyone else was in the main lab when it hit. I only survived because I was in the shielded containment chamber. Did you see the attacking vessel? Celine asked, studying him carefully. Aaron nodded, his hands trembling slightly. Black hull, no markings, moved like nothing I've ever seen. Something in his description stirred Celine's memory. The captain, she said quietly. Did you see who was commanding it? Aaron's gaze dropped. Just for a moment, on the view screen when they hailed us. Dark hair, scar across his jaw. He looked up at her. He said they were the vanguard of a new order, that the Alliance had failed humanity for the last time. Celine fought to keep her expression neutral. But her heart raced. The description matched Kane, down to the scar he'd received during a training accident they'd both survived at the academy. Thank you, Lieutenant, she said, rising to leave. Rest now. You're safe here. Am I? Aaron asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Are any of us? Over the following days, Celine found herself spending more time with Aaron. Unlike Kareem, who maintained his suspicion of the rescued human, she found Aaron's perspective valuable, not just about the attack, but about the growing tensions between humanity and the Alliance. There's been talk for years, he told her as they shared a meal in the officers' mess. Frustration about the Council's restrictions on human expansion, technology development. Enough to justify attacks on Alliance vessels? Celine asked. Aaron shrugged. People who feel cornered do desperate things. Their conversations often turned personal. Aaron had lost his partner in the attack, just as Celine had lost Kane years earlier. Their shared grief formed a bond, different from her complicated history with Jax, but no less powerful. One evening, as they stood on the observation deck watching the nebula's ever-shifting patterns, Aaron's hand brushed against hers. She didn't pull away. In all this darkness, he said softly, it helps to remember there's still beauty in the universe. Celine turned to look at him, seeing something in his eyes that had been missing from her life for too long, hope. Impulsively, she leaned forward and kissed him. For a moment, the weight of command, of her mission, lifted from her shoulders. When they parted, she felt a pang of guilt. I shouldn't have... I don't, Aaron interrupted gently. Don't apologize for being human. The irony of his words wasn't lost on her. All her life, she'd balanced her human heritage with her Lyran upbringing, never fully belonging to either world. Perhaps that's why this mission affected her so deeply. It forced her to choose sides in a conflict that would tear her apart regardless of the outcome. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A Tholian scout returned with confirmation. The human warship had been spotted lurking at the edge of the Maw Nebula, apparently damaged and making repairs. This was their chance, as the task force prepared for what could be their final confrontation. Dr. Halve requested a private meeting with Celine. In his quarters, surrounded by artifacts from dozens of worlds, his hobby was xenoanthropology. He offered her a cup of Terran tea. Commander, he said, settling his lanky frame into a chair across from her. I feel compelled to share my observations. About the crew? Celine asked, sipping the fragrant brew. About you. His multiple eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. Your pursuit of this vessel has become personal. Dangerously so. Celine stiffened. My priorities remain clear, Doctor. Do they? He set his cup down carefully. You've been reviewing Captain Kane's service records obsessively. You've grown close to Lieutenant Lee, perhaps seeking connection to your lost humanity. You avoid Commander Mercer, whose interest in you creates complicated emotions. You've been monitoring me, Celine accused, anger rising. I've been observing, as is my duty. Hav corrected gently. Commander, revenge is not merely a poison, it is a labyrinth. The deeper you venture, the more you lose yourself. This isn't about revenge, Celine insisted. It's about stopping a threat. Then why do you carry his picture? Why do you still wear the ring he gave you, hidden beneath your uniform? Celine stood abruptly. This conversation is over. As she reached the door, Hav's quiet voice followed her. To fight your own ghosts is to risk losing your soul, Commander. And we need your soul intact for what comes next. His words haunted her as she reviewed the final battle plans. The task force would approach through the nebula's magnetic interference, using it to mask their signatures until the last possible moment. The element of surprise might be their only advantage against the warship's superior technology. Jax found her in the tactical room late that night, staring at holographic projections of the battle space. Can't sleep? He asked, coming to stand beside her. Too much to consider, she replied. He studied the projections. You're second-guessing the approach vector. The nebula provides cover, but it also blinds our sensors. We could be flying into a trap. Jax nodded. True, but sometimes you have to take the uncertain path. Their eyes met, and Celine knew he wasn't just talking about the mission anymore. The tension between them had grown since Aaron's arrival, though Jax had said nothing directly. Jax, Don't, he interrupted with a sad smile. Not now. When this is over, maybe we can talk about what might have been. But right now, we need the commander. Not Celine. He was right. Of course, personal feelings had to wait. The lives of thousands depended on her focus, her judgment. Get some rest, Jax said, squeezing her shoulder gently before leaving. Tomorrow will be challenging enough. At 0500 ship's time, the task force entered the nebula's outer boundary. Visibility dropped to near zero as cosmic dust and radiation interfered with sensors. They proceeded in tight formation, navigating by gravitational markers placed by advanced scouts. At Aero 630, they reached the designated staging area. Still no sign of the enemy vessel on long-range scans. Could it have moved on? Reyna asked from her station. Unlikely, Karim replied. Our intelligence was specific. Celine studied the tactical display, something nagging at her instincts. Run a full-spectrum analysis of the region directly ahead. Focus on gravity distortions, not energy signatures. The results appeared moments later, a subtle warping of space approximately 50,000 kilometers ahead, consistent with a massive object using some form of cloaking technology. There you are, Celine whispered. She opened a channel to the fleet. All vessels, battle stations, target coordinates being transmitted now. Approach pattern Delta. Weapons free on my mark. The task force moved forward, spreading into an attack formation designed to surround the enemy vessel. As they closed to 30,000 kilometers, the distortion ahead suddenly shifted. They've detected us, Karim reported tensely. Hold formation, Celine ordered. They're prepared to... The space before them rippled, and the human warship materialized, larger than in previous encounters, its obsidian hull absorbing light from the nebula. Celine's breath caught. It was a monster of a vessel, easily twice the size of the Aurora, bristling with weapon emplacements unlike anything in the Alliance arsenal. "All ships, engage," she commanded. The task force opened fire simultaneously, energy beams and projectiles converging on the human vessel. For a moment, it seemed they might have caught it unprepared, then reality itself seemed to bend around the warship. A swirling vortex of energy erupted from its main cannon, expanding outward in a spiral pattern that defied physics. Where it touched Alliance ships, they simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not damaged, erased from existence. "What in the name of the seven hells is that?" Jax's voice crackled over the comm. "Quantum vortex torpedo," Aaron answered from behind Selena. She hadn't heard him enter the bridge. "Theoretical weapon. Collapses matter into a singularity." Celine watched in horror as ship after ship vanished. In just 120 seconds, over half the task force was gone. They were 4 minutes into the battle, and defeat was already certain. "Retreat," she ordered. "All ships, maximum FTL, scatter pattern." As the surviving vessels prepared to jump, the enemy warship suddenly stopped firing. A communication request flashed on Reyna's console. "They're hailing us," she reported incredulously. "Put it through," Celine said, steeling herself. The view screen flickered, and a face appeared that sent shockwaves through Celine's core. Captain Darius Kane, older, harder, a jagged scar across his jaw that hadn't been there when she knew him, but unmistakably the man she had once planned to marry. "Celine," he said, his voice exactly as she remembered. "I had hoped to spare you this." She fought to keep her expression neutral, aware of her crew watching. "Captain Kane, you're supposed to be dead." A bitter smile twisted his lips. "In many ways, I am. The man you knew died when he learned the truth." "What truth could possibly justify this?" she demanded, gesturing toward the view screen still showing the battle, or rather, the slaughter. "The Council massacred our first colony," Kane replied, his voice hardening. "New Eden. 30 years ago. They claimed it was a tragic accident, reactor malfunction. But it was deliberate. A test of Alliance weapons on human targets. Authorized at the highest levels." Celine shook her head. "That's impossible. The Alliance would never—" "I have the proof," Kane interrupted. "Recovered from the Council's own secure archives. They feared our expansion, our innovation. So they decided to send a message, a warning to stay in our designated zone. And this is your response, mass murder?" Kane leaned forward. "This is justice. Celine, long delayed. The human fleet is mobilizing as we speak. This was just the demonstration." The implications were staggering. If Kane was telling the truth, if a full-scale human fleet launched an assault using weapons like the quantum vortex torpedo, "It doesn't have to be this way," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Let me see your evidence. If what you say is true, we can bring this to the public, force accountability. The time for talk is over." Kane cut her off. "But out of respect for what we once shared, I'll give you one chance. Withdraw your remaining ships. Tell the Council what you've witnessed here. Warn them what's coming." Before she could respond, the transmission cut off. Moments later, the human warship activated its FTL drive and vanished. Silence fell over the bridge. The tactical display showed the devastating results. Of the 20-ship task force, only 7 remained. Over 300 ships, thousands of lives, gone in less than 4 minutes. "Orders, Commander?" Kareem asked, his voice subdued. Celine stared at the empty space where Kane's ship had been. "Recover any survivors, then set course for the Lyran homeworld. Maximum speed." As the crew carried out her commands, Celine retreated to her ready room. Her mind raced with implications, possibilities, choices. If Kane was lying, then humanity had developed terrifying new weapons and launched an unprovoked war. If he was telling the truth. Her door chimed. "Enter," she called, expecting Jax or perhaps Dr. Halve. Instead, Lieutenant Aaron Lee stepped inside, his expression grave. Without a word, he placed a data crystal on her desk. "What's this?" she asked. "Everything you need to know," he replied, "about New Eden, about the Council's decision, about what really happened to Kane's deep space mission 3 years ago." Celine stared at him. "Who are you really?" Aaron met her gaze unflinchingly. "Someone who believes war can still be averted, someone who thinks you might be the only person who can stop this." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, nothing I told you about myself was a lie. My ship was attacked. I did lose someone I loved. The only omission was that I knew exactly who attacked us and why." After he left, Celine sat motionless for several minutes, staring at the data crystal. Finally, she slotted it into her console. The information was damning. Classified council minutes detailing the decision to contain human expansion. Orders for the covert operation against New Eden, the cover-up afterward. And most shocking, the truth about Kane's mission. His ship hadn't been lost. It had been deliberately targeted after discovering evidence of the conspiracy, with Kane himself presumed killed. The lone survivor. He had spent 3 years gathering allies, resources, and developing the technology that would ensure humanity could never be victimized again. Celine closed the files, feeling physically ill. Everything she had believed in, served, protected, built on lies and genocide. A plan began to form in her mind, reckless, possibly suicidal, but perhaps the only chance to prevent the galaxy from burning in the fire of human vengeance. She sent an encrypted message to Aaron's quarters. "I need coordinates and a way in." Hours later, as the Aurora led the surviving ships toward Lyran space, Celine quietly boarded a single-pilot corvette in the auxiliary bay. She had filed a flight plan for a reconnaissance sweep, standard procedure after a major engagement. Only Aaron knew her true destination. The coordinates he provided led to a massive asteroid at the nebula's edge, hollowed out and converted into a temporary base. As she approached, her corvette was surrounded by fighter drones, human technology, sleek and deadly. She transmitted the authentication code Aaron had given her. The drones peeled away, escorting her to a docking bay. Kane was waiting when she disembarked, flanked by officers in the unmarked uniforms of what she now knew was called the Human Liberation Front. "I didn't expect this," he admitted, his expression guarded. "Coming alone was either very brave or very foolish." "I saw the files," Celine said without preamble. "About New Eden, about your mission." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps hope. "And, if it's true, the Council must be held accountable. But this," she gestured around them, "this isn't justice, Kane. It's vengeance. And it will cost billions of innocent lives." He stepped closer. "Some prices must be paid for freedom." That's exactly what the Council told themselves when they murdered New Eden's colonists. She countered. "When does it end? How many cycles of revenge before nothing remains?" For a moment, the mask of the hardened revolutionary slipped, and she glimpsed the man she had once loved. Then his expression hardened again. "Come," he said abruptly. "There's something you should see." He led her through the asteroid base to a massive chamber at its heart. Inside stood what could only be the warship's power core, a swirling mass of energy contained within interlocking fields. pulsing with a rhythm almost like a heartbeat. The quantum reactor, Kane explained. The source of our new weapons, harnessing energy from parallel dimensions. Celine stared at it, understanding dawning. It's unstable. Kane nodded. Each firing degrades the containment matrix. Eventually, it will collapse. Taking half the galaxy with it, she whispered, horrified. You know this and you're using it anyway? It buys humanity time to deploy more conventional forces, Kane replied, not meeting her eyes. A sacrifice play. Is that what the crew understands? That they're on a suicide mission? They know what's at stake. Celine moved closer to the reactor, studying its construction. Her engineering background, specialized in advanced propulsion systems, gave her enough understanding to recognize the basic principles. There's another way, she said suddenly. A controlled shutdown. It would render your weapons useless, but prevent catastrophic failure. Kane laughed bitterly. And why would I agree to that? Surrender the only advantage we have. Because I can offer you something better. Celine replied, the truth, broadcast to every world in the Alliance, with the evidence you've gathered, with my testimony as a commander in the Lyran fleet. We can force accountability without genocide. The Council will never allow it. The Council won't have a choice if enough people demand justice. She stepped toward him, close enough to see the flecks of gray in his once dark hair. Kane. Darius. The man I loved would never have chosen mass murder, no matter the provocation. Something broke in his expression. That man died at New Eden. No, she said softly, reaching out to touch his scarred face. He's still here, still fighting for what's right, just lost in the darkness. For a long moment, they stood frozen in tableau, her hand on his cheek, his eyes locked with hers, the quantum reactor pulsing between them like a ticking bomb. Then alarms blared throughout the base. An officer rushed in. Captain, Alliance fleet dropping out of FTL, at least 30 ships led by the Imperator. Zelaric, Celine breathed. How did he find this place? Kane's expression darkened. It doesn't matter. Battle stations. As they rushed to the command center, Celine's mind raced. If Zelaric's fleet engaged the warship, the reactor would be pushed beyond its limits. The resulting explosion would destroy everything for light years. The tactical display showed Zelaric's fleet approaching in attack formation. The warship, which she now knew was named Liberator, was preparing to launch. You can't fight them, she told Kane urgently. Not with the reactor in its current state. We have no choice, he replied grimly. They found us before we were ready. An idea formed in Celine's mind, desperate, possibly suicidal, but their only chance. I need to get back to my Corvette, she said. I can approach the Imperator, try to negotiate a ceasefire. Kane shook his head. Zelaric won't listen. He lost his family at Zellar Prime. He believes it was human operatives. Another council lie, Celine realized. They've been playing both sides for decades. Oh, go, Kane decided suddenly. Try your diplomacy, then we'll hold as long as we can. As Celine raced back to her Corvette, the base shuddered under the first impacts from Zelaric's fleet. The Liberator was launching, its obsidian hull emerging from the asteroid like a predator from its den. She fired up the Corvette's engines, plotting a course not for the Imperator but for the Liberator itself. Kane would never agree to her real plan, but it was their only hope. The battle erupted around her as she navigated through weapons fire and debris. The Liberator engaged Zelaric's fleet, its quantum weapons creating devastating vortices that consumed ship after ship. But with each firing, the distinctive energy pulse grew more erratic. The reactor was approaching critical failure. Celine's Corvette reached the Liberator's ventral docking bay. Using the authentication codes Aaron had provided to bypass security, As she suspected, most of the crew was at battle stations, leaving the engineering section minimally defended. She made her way through the ship's corridors, using her Lyran tactical training to avoid detection. Finally, she reached the secondary reactor control room, a backup system that would allow for manual override of the main chamber she had seen in the asteroid. Working quickly, she began the complex sequence that would initiate a controlled shutdown. The ship shuddered violently around her, the battle outside intensifying. Alarms blared as the reactor's instability increased. The door behind her hissed open. She whirled, expecting security personnel, but instead found Aaron Lee. "I figured you'd try something like this," he said, moving to her side. Kane realized it too. "He's on his way." "Hey, help me," she urged. "If that reactor goes critical." "I know," Aaron replied, joining her at the controls. "That's why I'm here." Together, they worked through the shutdown sequence, racing against time as the reactor's containment fields fluctuated dangerously. The ship's lights flickered, and artificial gravity wavered. The door slid open again. Kane stood there, phaser drawn, his expression a mix of betrayal and resignation. "Step away from the controls," he ordered. "It's too late," Celine replied, not stopping her work. "The sequence is already past the critical point. Either we complete the controlled shutdown, or we all die when the reactor breaches." Kane hesitated, conflict evident in his face. "The Council will face justice," Celine promised, "but not like this, not at the cost of billions of innocent lives." For a moment, she thought he would shoot. Then, with a sound like a man surrendering his last hope, he holstered his weapon and moved to join them at the controls. "The primary stabilizers are failing," he said, fingers flying across the console. "We need to reroute through the auxiliary systems." With Kane's expertise, they managed to establish a stable shutdown path. The reactor's deadly pulses began to slow, to stabilize. On the tactical display, they could see Zelleric's fleet holding position, apparently confused by the Liberator's suddenly defensive posture. "The weapons are offline," Aaron reported, "shields at minimum. We're essentially defenseless." "Open a channel to the Imperator," Kane ordered, surprising them both. Admiral Zelleric's face appeared on the screen, scarred and cold with hatred. "Surrendering, human. Offering a truce," Kane replied. "And information you need to hear." Zellerick sneered. "Why would I trust anything you say?" "Because I'm not just any human," Kane said. "I'm the man who discovered what really happened at Zelar Prime. The same thing that happened at New Eden. The same council. The same lies." That got Zellerick's attention. "Explain." "Not over an open channel. Allow us to dock with the Imperator. Bring whatever security you deem necessary. But hear us out before more blood is shed." A long, tense silence followed. Finally, Zellerick nodded curtly. "You have 1 hour. Any sign of treachery, and I will personally ensure your death is neither quick nor painless." The transmission ended. Kane turned to Celine, something like hope kindling in his eyes for the first time. "Will he listen?" she asked. "Once he sees the evidence, he'll have no choice." Kane's hand found hers. "It's not the justice I envisioned, but perhaps it's the justice we need." The meeting aboard the Imperator was tense, heavily guarded. Celine, Kane, and Aaron presented their evidence to a visibly shaken Zellerick. Files, testimonies, recordings that proved beyond doubt the Council's systematic manipulation of tensions between species for decades. "Why?" Zellerick demanded, his voice hoarse after hours of review. "What purpose could this possibly serve?" "Control," Kane explained. "A divided alliance is easier to govern. Separate incidents, carefully attributed to different species. Humans blamed for Zelar Prime, Draconians for the Tholian massacre, and so on. always with just enough evidence to seem plausible, never enough to prove definitively. We've been fighting each other while the real enemy sat in council chambers, Zeleric murmured, aged by revelation. The decision was made in that room, a temporary alliance between former enemies united by a common purpose, exposing the truth and holding the guilty accountable. 3 weeks later, representatives from across the alliance gathered for an emergency summit on neutral ground, the space station Concordia. The evidence was presented in full, broadcast across all channels, impossible to suppress. The recording showed council members coldly discussing the strategic necessity of staged atrocities, calculating acceptable casualty numbers, planning cover stories. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Protests erupted on hundreds of worlds. Council members fled or were arrested. A provisional government formed, composed of representatives from all species, including, for the first time, humans in positions of true authority. In the aftermath, Celine found herself standing on Concordia's observation deck, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy, diplomatic vessels, aid transports, military escorts now flying a new alliance banner. Footsteps approached behind her. Kane, dressed in civilian clothes, came to stand at her side. "The quantum technology has been secured," he reported. "Research teams think they can adapt it for peaceful applications, medical use, power generation, no more weapons." "And the Liberator?" she asked. "Being refitted as a diplomatic vessel." A smile touched his lips. Seemed appropriate, given its new mission. Celine turned to face him fully. "And its captain?" Kane's expression grew uncertain. "That depends. The provisional government has offered me command for the first outreach mission to the Outer Rim territories. 3 years. Minimum." "Sounds challenging," she said carefully. "It would be easier with a first officer I trust," Kane replied, eyes searching hers. "Someone who understands both human and Lyran perspectives. Someone who knows when to fight and when to make peace." Before she could respond, more footsteps approached. Jax Mercer, now Admiral Mercer of the Reformed Alliance Fleet, nodded to them both. "Commander Torres, Captain Kane, the ceremony begins in 20 minutes. His tone was professional, but his eyes lingered on Celine. The three of them stood in awkward silence for a moment. "I should check on the arrangements," Jax said finally, turning to leave. "Jax," Celine called after him. He paused. "Thank you for everything." A sad smile crossed his face. "Just doing my duty, Commander." He glanced between her and Kane. Some paths are meant to be walked together, even when they diverge for a time. With that, he left them alone. Celine looked back at Kane, feeling the weight of everything they had lost and found. 3 years is a long time, she said. "Not compared to the 3 years we've already spent apart," he replied softly. "But I understand if your path lies elsewhere now." She thought of Aaron, who had accepted a research position on Earth. Of Jax, whose feelings for her had never quite been resolved. Of all the possibilities before her. "And my path," she said slowly, "has always been toward the truth, wherever that leads." Kane smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "The Liberator departs in 3 days, if you decide to join us." "Well, the first officer's quarters are right next to the captain's." "Convenient," she observed, fighting a smile of her own. "I thought so," he agreed. Later, at the ceremony marking the formation of the new alliance government, Celine stood with her former crew. Kareem, promoted to commander of his own vessel. Reyna, now head of Alliance Communications. Dr. Halv, appointed to the new Ethics Council. They watched as representatives of all species signed the Reformed Charter. "Who would have thought," Reyna mused, that all it would take to unite the galaxy was nearly blowing it up first. Kareem's scales rippled in what Celine now recognized as amusement. Humans, always doing things the complicated way. Speaking of complicated, Reyna said, nudging Celine, word is you've been offered multiple commissions. Made a decision yet? Celine's gaze drifted to where Kane stood with the human delegation, tall and resolute. He caught her eye across the room, and something passed between them. Understanding, possibility, promise. I think I have, she replied. As the ceremony concluded, the station's massive viewports revealed a spectacular sight. Hundreds of ships from across the Alliance, arranged in perfect formation around the Concordia. At their center, the refitted Liberator, its once black hull now bearing the symbols of all Alliance species. A beacon of unity where once it had been an instrument of vengeance. 3 days later, Selena Torres stood on the Liberator's bridge, now wearing the uniform of the Reformed Alliance. Around her, a crew composed of humans, Lyrans, Tholians, even a few Draconians, former enemies united in common purpose. "Course, Commander?" Kane asked from the captain's chair, formality barely concealing his joy at her presence. Celine looked to the stars visible through the view screen, endless possibilities stretching before them. "The Outer Rim," she replied. "There's a whole galaxy waiting to hear our story." As the Liberator engaged its drives, the quantum reactor now safely converted to a revolutionary propulsion system, Celine felt a sense of rightness settle over her. They had nearly lost everything to revenge, but had found something greater in its place: truth, justice, and the promise of a future where different species could learn from past mistakes instead of repeating them. Kane's hand found hers as the stars began to blur around them. Together, they ventured into the unknown, no longer enemies, no longer divided, but united in the greatest power humans had always possessed, the ability to learn, to change, and to forge new paths through even the darkest of spaces.